I'm hoping the answer you came up with on the answer to do speculators serve a useful social purpose would be it depends. The answer as ever in many things economics is it depends. If they guess correctly, then they provide a valuable service. Just like Joseph, they shift consumption from when there's a lot of stuff around to when there's not as much of it. They shift resources again from lower to higher valued uses. So what would happen if they predict well? So let's again break out our tools and let's think about what's going on here. So we have supply and demand, and this is in 1 year from now. We have price and quantity, and maybe in the present we have this situation. Well, you know what? Let's not do the present in 1 year, okay? Maybe that'll be a little bit too hard to think about just right now. Let's think about if this was the case in Bozeman and this was the case in Billings. So, if this was the case and you were somebody sitting around looking for a profit opportunity, now we're going to have to come back to profit and get more specific about that, but what would be a reasonable thing to do in this instance? So this is the price in Bozeman, and this is the prevailing price in Billings. So if you're an enterprising young person like yourselves, and let's assume that there's no barriers to movement at present, there's nothing going on, you can successfully and painlessly travel between these two places, I think hopefully most of you are saying, what would make sense to do? Does it matter what this product is? Nope. We could have this be cement, we could have this be water bottles, we could have this be iodized salt. That's still over here, I need to remember to put that away. What could you do? Well, you could go to Bozeman, you could buy up a bunch of salt, let's say this is the salt market, and what would you then do? You'd ship it to Billings and you could sell it. Seems profitable, seems like a promising opportunity. In the process, what's going to happen over here when you go to Bozeman and buy a bunch of salt? Well, that would reasonably be viewed as an increase in the number of consumers. And that is going to drive up the price in Bozeman. Right? Now, you're not consuming these in Bozeman, but you are now part of the consumer market in Bozeman. And that will then cause an increase in the quantity of salt supplied in Bozeman as we've drawn this. What are you then going to do with that salt? You are going to bring that salt to Billings and you are going to sell it in Billings. And when you do so, you are going to, in effect, increase the number of suppliers, not changing the number of consumers, and yes, there will now be more salt in Billings than before. So over in Bozeman, there's going to be more salt sold, however, less salt consumed in Bozeman, because this still represents the demand for consumers in Bozeman. This is the demand for Bozeman consumers plus the demand for people who are bringing this to Billings. And so the amount of salt that people in Billings consume is going to fall, and the amount of salt that people in Billings, so the amount in Bozeman falls and the amount in Billings will rise. Is this a good thing? So this is, hopefully this makes sense. This is what would happen. Is this a good thing or not? Well, let's think about it. This salt, basically all of this salt, so these units of salt were shifted from here over to here, and then these were added on. So if you think about these units of salt in specific, if these had been consumed in Bozeman, and I'm not sure these are to scale, by the way, right? So my bad if they're not. They're not. But in effect, that salt And so that's there. In effect, I would need to shift this supply schedule out a little further. And this is still a little problematic, but if you think about the decrease in well-being from this salt being reallocated, we've taken these units definitely, plus a few other units, and moved them over here. So let's just focus on these units, or maybe we take a look at all of these units. It turns out if this distance and this distance are the same, which they should, well, no, because we have some response here in demand. This area here is by definition going to be smaller than that area there. So we've taken this salt from over here, which has a relatively low value being placed on the salt, and moving it over here to where it has more value. So assuming that you this is what we call arbitrage. I'll write it down here. A-R-B-I-T-R-A-G-E. So if these entrepreneurs are successful arbitrage just means taking advantage of different prices in different locations. So in other words, I didn't change this salt, I just recognized that it was selling for relatively little in Bozeman, and I was able to sell it for more in Billings. That's what we call arbitrage, taking advantage of different prices at different locations. You'll hear people talk about currency arbitrage. In other words, that's simply taking advantage of the fact that a lira is trading for a certain number of dollars in Turkey and it's trading for more dollars in the US, in which case you would want to go to Turkey, trade dollars for lira, bring it back, trade lira for dollars. People are going to keep doing this until what happens? Until ignoring the cost of transportation, we end up at the same price between them. So if this costs nothing to transport, we would expect the price in Billings to fall and the price in Bozeman to rise until they are at the same point. Now, with transportation, we would expect them to adjust up until the cost of transportation. So if it costs 10 cents to transport this iodized salt from Bozeman over here, then we would expect the price to converge to within 10 cents. Now that cost, of course, includes the opportunity cost of labor and other things, not simply the gas. So if these speculators are right, they move salt from a lower valued use to a higher valued use. What if they're wrong? Let's take a look at that. Now again, are middlemen speculators? Yes, we all are speculators. Now, if they are wrong, and by the time maybe they think the price, so here's Bozeman again, we have the demand, we have the supply, and here we have Billings, we have the demand, we have the supply. Well, this is what they think is happening, but by the time they actually expect the price to be higher in Billings than in Bozeman, but by the time they get here, they discover that maybe this is the case. And so they now have bought this. So they thought the price was going to be here, but instead it's down here. And so now what happens? They bid up the price in Bozeman, and then they cause the price to fall here in Billings. And if we think about compared to if they hadn't been doing anything, we have taken that salt there and moved it over here where it generates less value than it would have if it was left in Bozeman. So do middlemen and arbitragers serve a useful purpose? Now, this is a form of speculator. So they drove up the price in Bozeman, convincing people and giving them the information to cut back. They drove down the price in Billings, causing people to consume more. In the process here, they destroyed value. So wait. Speculators and arbitrageurs can create value or they can destroy value. The difference is whether they turn out to be right or not. So that's the key. So speculators serve a useful purpose when they are right, and they destroy value or make us worse off as a society when they are wrong. So now the question would be, should we expect them to be right more than they're wrong or wrong more than they're right? Because they're good when they are right more than they are wrong, and they are bad or destroy value when they are wrong more than they are right. So maybe we say, ooh, crap, maybe we don't want these speculators or these middlemen or these arbitrageurs in place. Well, but the question is, what should we expect? Well, what happens? Let's think about this. Pi is going to be my symbol for profit here. So, when arbitrageurs are right more than they're wrong, what's going to happen? They're going to make profit greater than zero. They're going to make positive profit, right? They're going to make money. Because they're selling, they're taking goods, they're buying low, and they're selling high. Of course, in the process, they are receiving the information, etc. How about when they're wrong more than they're right? Well, they're actually going to lose money. They're going to be buying high and selling low. So here would be the question. If people consistently make negative profit, in other words, they are wrong more than they're right, what would we expect to happen? Unless they're a complete moron, we would expect them to leave. We would expect them to go do something else and thereby stop destroying value. On the other hand, if they are right more than they are wrong, making positive profit, we would expect them to stay. And so, again, barring anything else, without anything else intervening, holding all else constant, I would expect speculators to be right more than they are wrong. Not because they inherently are right more than they are wrong, but because of this adaptive process whereby people who are bad at this stuff, who are poor, who on balance are not able to effectively predict the future or predict where things will have higher value, those people who are consistently wrong more than they are right are going to leave the market. And so the people who are still going to be in the market are going to be the people who are right more than they are wrong and also generate more value. Here's the question. Could we change this to make it so that this doesn't happen? I think the answer is yes. How about when people make mistakes? If we say, you know what? We're going to compensate you. We're going to pay off the losses. And on the other hand, if we say to anybody who makes money, you know what? We're going to tax it away. Now what's going to happen? It's unclear what these people are going to do. They might stay. They might leave. But these people, they're definitely not going to leave anymore. If you said, we will compensate, if you sent me to Vegas and said, if you lose money, we'll make you whole, and if you win money, you get to keep it, I would go, and I would come back a very happy man. I would take some very high-risk gambles, go play craps, go play things that have a very low likelihood. I would continue to blow through all my money. Again, this is on the understanding that you would compensate me and pay off my losses. And then anything I win, right, win big, I get to keep that. In that case, we can break this system. So here would be another question, an extension, is would we ever and have we ever put in place a situation where we compensate people for their losses and simultaneously tax the successful people maybe out of business? Now, this isn't essential here. We could still have this here. The key is if we compensate people for their losses, we're going to have more of the bad speculators, the ones who are not very good at this, in the market. They're not going to leave. So take a moment and think about, have we ever, can you think of any examples where we as a society, particularly through the government, through the agency of the government, have said to people who are losing money, you know what, we're going to make you whole. Can you think of any examples like that? Something to think about before you start the next video.